1967, when I got out of the service in May, I come back from overseas. I think I said it this way, that I was standing across from the Skyline Electric that had on Zelli's property watching the tail end of the band come in to St. Anthony's. It was a big, that was their 50th anniversary for the church. And I see this stake body truck with some guys on it I know. Followed them to the church and talked to them. It was Denny Zimmerman and Art Davenport, and Fran Endler was there. And they said, yeah, we just started up a couple months ago. We wanted to play for the St. Anthony's celebration. And they got some of the old timers, so that's what they call it, the Old Timers Band. And so why don't you start playing with us? So I started on Monday at the Padua Center. That's where we rehearsed. And it went from there. And Frank was our director. Frank was I don't know if he ever looked at the music. It was all in his head. And it was mostly marches. He did a lot of the marches and stuff. My grandfather was in the original 1911 Mascagna band with him. And of course, I never knew my grandfather, but my father said it was in the band from 36 to 39 or 40 when he had to leave because he had to work. But Frank was a very strict director, very strict. You paid attention, the same way you would with Arnold Gabriel. It was just you knew, you paid attention. You didn't talk in between, you didn't do anything. You paid attention. They got that respect from you. And when Frank raised that baton, you better be ready, because he was ready. And but he was a very friendly, very kind man. But when he was up there and he was directing, you paid attention and you did what he wanted you to do. I think it was in the mid-1970s. A bunch of them got together in the Old Timers Band. They said, we got to get more members. So they thought, let's change the name to the Cortland County Community Band. Put it in paper, nobody knew who we were. So they ended up having to put it in parentheses after it, the Old Timers Band. That went along for a while until finally they just dropped it. They said, nobody knows who we are. We got to go back to the Old Timers Band. And that originated because when Phil Natoli and John DeSenza got together and said, hey, we got all the music upstairs in the Green Arch. Let's see if we can get some of the old timers back, the old Civic Band, to see if we want to play again. And that's how the Old Timers Band started, with the name Old Timers. We got old timers in the band. So, yeah, I was a young timer at the time. Now I'm an old timer. We've got a lot of people that came up that way, became old timers. So the name it's part of our heritage. Been there for 50 years. That's what we're known as. Young or old, you're in the Old Timers Band.
There was a clarinet player, W. Lawrence Harrington, Larry Harrington, who had something, I'm sure he had something to do with his brother Reggie's Harrington's with the music store, but Larry did own was editor of the Cortland Democrat newspaper. And Larry played clarinet, and he was involved in a lot of musical organizations throughout over the years. The generation he came up with, big band era, swing music. And then, of course, his days, later years with the civic bands, and any swing organization that popped up, he was involved with that. And I mentioned his name because he wrote a book in prose. It was really quite fascinating. And the name of the book is They All Love Music. And there's a copy in the Cortland Free Library. And he mentions in prose all the individuals and the organizations. And there is a chapter on the Old Timers Band and it's all written in prose with the names of some of the people that played. They All Love Music by Lawrence or W. Lawrence Harrington. And it's worth a read. It's kind of fascinating.
One of the wonderful things about the Old Timers Band is that it's a family event. So all of my siblings played in the Old Timers Band. And we have photos of the four of us at different times that Mom had taken of Jim and Mary Ann with their snare drum sticks, Charlie with his trumpet, and me with my clarinet, and at different St. Anthony's days or other events. But it wasn't just us. There were 2 Perfettis, there were multiple Dovies, there were multiple Pauldines, and Marty and Larry Biviano, and then later Donna Biviano, Jim and Jean Reagan, lots of families were part of the band, and that was really a fun part of the band. And if you weren't actual siblings, then there were a lot of cousins too, like the Dovey cousins and Mary Ann and others are related. So that's I think really fun.
Well, I was in high school, about 14 years old, I guess, in the 9th grade or so. And they needed a flute player, they didn't have one. And so I was, for many years, the only flute player in the band.
And who was directing the band at that time?
Frank Crisera. And Ray was playing trumpet in the band when I played in the band. He played a couple of years and then went to the Ernest Williams School of Music in Brooklyn. And quite an outstanding school, and the respected Ernest Williams was a trumpet player and played with the Metropolitan Opera Company, and his brother played clarinet with the opera company. And I don't know whether everybody knows these names, but who played with him? Frank Alsace, Jimmy Burke, several others, all graduated from the Ernest Williams School of Music, and that's where Ray went. And Ernest Williams playing at the opera was really stressed transposition, because in an opera, you play E-flat trumpet, then B-flat comes on an F trumpet, and you have to transpose right on the spot. You don't have time to pick up a new instrument. So he really stressed that. I remember Ray coming back, and we played the Stars and Stripes Forever, and he played the piccolo part on the trumpet. And in those days, it was D-flat piccolo. From B-flat trumpet to D-flat, that was quite a transposition.
I was really amazed at how good the band sounded. I expected the old Civic Band or something, and they really sounded very well. I'm very impressed. The trumpet section is very good, very well in tune. I was amazed. Yeah, so I enjoyed playing with the band. You know, I might come back for St. Anthony's Day. I don't know. That's a fun time, you know.
And my first exposure to the band was as a young man, hearing them play in the west end of Suggett Park. Frank Crisera was the conductor in those days. And the musicians on stage all looked like they were in on a secret that nobody else knew about. And I always wondered what that was. And many years later, when I took up the saxophone and started playing, I found out that the thing that made them all smile was that when we perform concert music at a high level, which we occasionally do, and the audience responds, it's magic. It's a feeling that's unreplaceable by anything else. So being a member of the Old Timers Band lets me experience the same things that I used to experience when I was young and started playing the saxophone.
You know, all through my musical life, you heard stories about Colonel Gabriel and all the other, you know, Ray Crisera and all those people, and they just influenced you as a musician to what you wanted to become because of the tradition that was set here. And there's been a lot of good musicians come out of this town.
There was no MC like there is now, and I think this is great the way they do it now. But I don't ever remember in the Civic Band Frank Crisera ever explaining what we were playing or any history about that number.
And this is another thing that sets the Old Timer Band apart from other bands I've played in, is we have an announcer that will give the audience background on the music that we're playing and give them some history of the song. And And I think that's really important to engage the audience in that aspect. So they're not just sitting there, oh, they're playing this march now, okay, next one is this part. John is announcing and explaining the pieces as we're going. And then I think sometimes the back and forth between him and Ed discussing and talking about stories and taking the mic and stuff makes it even that much more entertaining for the audience that's there. It makes it more of a remarkable concert than just sitting there reading your program and going from song to song.
And the feedback I got from the public was really very good on most of that stuff too. Because I had 2 or 3 stories for nearly every piece we played frequently. When we first started, it was in the 60s. You didn't just Google things.
Right.
Because there was no Google. You know? Yeah, the world has become very, very different.
A humorous story with Frank directing. There was a bass drum player by the name of John Patriarchal, and he had lost his arm, or one of his arms, and I got to believe it could have been World War II. I'm not positive about that, but he would have been of that generation. So the Old Timers Band formed, and I believe it was under the Old Timers Band name, and John was playing the bass drum. And I think it was either during a rehearsal or during a concert where Frank, he says, points to John in broken English, says, I want you to muffle the drum. And typically, you're hitting the drum with one hand and muffling with the other. And so there's John's looking up at Frank, says, hi, I'll do the best I can. Well, that was under Frank. I mean, that was one of the funniest stories I don't know if I was with the band at that time when that was going on, but I remember that story to this day. And Johnny Stevens said that he was there when that happened, that he asked John, one-armed John, to muffle the bass drum. I'm going to digress a minute because I think this is funny too. I got into the band, and John Patriarchal, I think, was playing in the band when I got in. Then the progression went to John Stevens. They needed a bass drummer, and John Stevens loved music, loved the marches. And he says, I can't read music. And Frank said, you just beat that bass drum and I'll point to you when I want you to hit the cymbals. And so John Stevens became the bass drummer under Frank, and then Donna, well, I should say for Sam Fercucci first. I'm sorry. It was Frank, Chris, Sam Fercucci, Donnie Yacovo, and I think he played a little bit under Ed. All right, this is Johnny Stevens. John had to retire. I mean, he looked at 90 being old. I don't know, not him. So he had to retire. So John Rose, who's the husband of Jeannie Rose, they're both in the band. John Rose stepped up to play the bass drum. So there's only one logical conclusion to it, to what I'm telling you, is apparently you have to be named John to be able to play the bass drum. Because it was John Patriarchal, John Stevens, and then it was John Rose now, so I don't know how that goes.
How about Frank Viviano?
Frank Viviano?
When he played drums next to you.
Yeah, Frank Viviano.
And he'd want you
Sure.
to play it softly and you wouldn't do it.
Did you know Frank?
I didn't know Frank, but I know a lot of Vivianos.
Oh yeah, Frank. He was a good guy. He played right next to me.
Yep.
He'd get madder than hell. When you got a part, you gotta, with that drum, you gotta give it to him sometime. He used to get so mad at me. I think I would hit it a little extra. And bawled me out. We're playing in the Homer Park one night. Gee, I don't know what the hell was going through his mind, but I was playing them up. Nobody was complaining. So I says, just a minute, Frank, you ain't gonna get away with this one with me. Jokingly though, but I meant it. We're gonna ask Sam Fercucci if I'm playing too loud. I said, when we three of us got together, I says, Frank, or Sam, am I playing too loud? I can't hear you. I said, there you are, Frank. Gosh darn it, you've been hollering at me all night.
I remember when we were organizing the band, and they called John like they called me, and John had not played in the band, but always had a yen to be a bass drummer of the band. So he took advantage of the opportunity and said yes, he wanted to play the bass drum. And I was very skeptical because he had never played in the band before. And so here I was. And for me, and I'm sure Eileen is for you, the bass drummer is really the most important person in the marching band. You know, if he's off, everybody's off and all that. So that's a big responsible job. And of course, John Stevens is a big bragger, and he's an optimist too. And so I said, gee, this guy thinks he can handle it, but I doubt it. But John had listened to music for years, well, I'm sure, with the idea that, oh, I'd love to play. But so he was pretty well prepared. He had listened for years. So, and he had a good sense of rhythm, absolutely, good sense of rhythm. So, he did well for a guy who couldn't read. You know, you'd have to tell him, say, hey, don't hit the bass drummer and the bass drum at this point here. Okay, I won't. Or I need a big one here, and he would do it. But he didn't read music at all, and even to this day, he doesn't read music. But he feels it. He'll tell you. You know, you might be the band director, but I'm the one who leads the band. Yeah.
I recall we were doing it on a hush hush. Nobody was going to. It was going to be a surprise party, and we had probably 10 instruments, I guess, maybe 12 or so. And it was a cold night. It was a cold night, and we gathered out in front of his house in cars and along the street, and then it was supposed to be a signal from Mary, his wife, to let us know that it was time to come in. And, well, it wasn't quite communicated too well, but we finally found out that we should come in. We got cold enough, so we said, we got to come in. So and we surprised him. I think he really was surprised. He might have thought maybe he knew something was going on. Maybe Mary wasn't acting right or something, but I don't know. But we played Caderna and what else, and we played several other pieces right there in his living room, and I'm so glad that happened, because that was he really enjoyed it, and he I don't know if he remembers a lot of it now, but he probably can. We were gathered around his living room, and he played. We even brought the drum in so he could bang on the drum while he was trying to act like he didn't know anything.
The band came right in front of that. Oh, it was great.
Nice.
It was great.
I think I remember that time. I wasn't there. I had to work.
You missed a good party.
I heard.
Afterward, the thing, they wouldn't let them quit. They had something to eat.
I heard that too.
Yeah, there were about 15 players.
And you put out a good spread for them.
I was coming downstairs, like here, and I heard the music. So I was, what the hell's going on? I went outside. There's 14 and 15 guys, and then they played inside for a little bit longer. You missed that night.
I did.
Remember, Mary?
Yeah, I do.
But yeah, I'm glad to come back, because sometimes they say you can't come back home, and you can. So it's very memorable. But as I came back through the years, there were fewer and fewer people that I knew. To this day, I don't know anybody in the band, which is kind of sad in a way. But the tradition goes on, and I applaud the band and Ed for continuing. And I think the band plays very, very well, better than it has in recent years. I was in the Army of Occupation, and you have to understand, after the war is over, now you're in the Army of Occupation, you're like an uncaged tiger, you know. I drank too much, I ate too much, I did everything too much. And my lieutenant, Newt Butler, said, "Sergeant, what are you doing to yourself?" And I said, "Well, you remember D-Day, you remember St. Louis?" He said, "Hold it right there. It's okay to look back, just don't stare." Great advice. But I was at the canning factory and boss of the cooker gang. And of course, you know, those are seasonal jobs, and you work at 8 o'clock in the morning until about 9 o'clock in the evening. So you're busy the entire day. Sometimes you just sleep there and get up the next morning and go to work. And it was Bert Stanley, who I told you came to the canning factory and got me out of that job and literally pushed me into college that fall of '46. And then we played for Pope John II. And that was kind of a long story because we started with a cruise in the Mediterranean and went into Tunisia and Istanbul, Athens, then up to the Adriatic to Bari, Venice, 5 days across Italy, and ended up in Rome on a Wednesday, which is when he has his huge conference. And there were 70,000 people in St. Peter's Square. And Dale was my solo, Dale Underwood. And after the general services were over, the 70,000 people remained because there were maybe about 200 Catholic couples who wanted the papal blessing. And so they were lined up, and I called one of his assistants over to ask if he minded if we played, because nothing was happening. And he said, "Well, yes, but keep it short, because His Holiness wants to take a photo with you." So we played about 17 or 18 minutes. I said, "Dale, let's do the Gershwin Fantasy." I said, "Well," he said, "Well, it's 7 minutes long." I said, "Well, let's start at measure 125. We'll leave out 125 measures." So it starts with "It ain't necessarily so," as he's blessing Catholic couples. And the medley ends with "I Got Rhythm," which is a very Catholic piece. But in spite of all of that, the Pope still took a photograph with us, which is in the book, by the way, theforceofdestiny.com.
So, the Old Timers Band was asked to be present for the, what is that called? Not the inauguration, that's the naming of the airport. So, there was another dignitary besides Colonel Levi Chase was going to be flown in, and that was Colonel Arnold Gabriel. Well, the plane landed with Colonel Chase and Colonel Gabriel, and Colonel Gabriel was asked to direct the band. And I think that brought out more the reporters standing around that Colonel Gabriel was directing the Old Timers Band, and yet here was a tribute to Colonel Levi Chase naming the airport after the man. But it seemed that Colonel Gabriel was getting more recognition. No slight to anybody, especially Colonel Chase, but that was kind of a humorous thing that, and Sam Fercucci was directing the band, I think, at that time. Yeah, a lot of people will remember that, of the older timers, I guess. Yeah, it was quite an honor when Colonel Gabriel directed the band. Everybody sat on the edge of their seats, and people listened. The audience listened, you know. So that was kind of an instance where, you know, it finally finally sticks in my memory. You know, it's all about music.
I remember one summer, at least one, if not two, on Monday nights I rehearsed with the Civic Band. Tuesday we rehearsed with the VFW Band. Wednesdays we rehearsed with the Cortland High School Alumni Band, which they let me play in, even though I was a Homer person. And then Thursdays, somebody had a job someplace, a concert to play, And then Fridays or Saturdays, generally the VFW had a parade, Firemen's Convention or some such thing. So basically, all we did was play the horn and night after night. And it was great because that way you kept yourself in shape to go back to school in the fall and play with the Homer band, with the high school band. But it was fun. We had a great time. We had a lot of fun, some of which I'll talk about and some of which I won't.
I cite pretty well, you know, for a guy who doesn't spend a lot of time with it. I take pride in my chops. I try to keep them up. But sometimes you know how you get a piece in your head that you just can't get past. There's an obstacle and you screw it up every time. Well, I forget what the piece was, but I had one of those with Donna, and I just screwed it up. And that piece was on the program for the St. Anthony's Festival that Colonel Gabriel was conducting. He conducted that piece. And I had never played it right. I had never actually gotten past that little hiccup until he conducted it that night, and I nailed it. And the next time we played it, Donna looked up at me and said, she says, you didn't screw that up for Colonel Gabriel, I noticed. And I said, well, I'm mortally afraid of Colonel Gabriel. And that, I think, is as good a way as I can describe how you, not that I didn't respect and love Donna, but a good conductor makes you fearful, makes you want his or her approval, and fills you with the sense that they are watching you. This was Gabriel. Gabriel conducted with everything he had, including his eyes. That's all he had to do. That's all he had to do was look your way. You knew he heard everything. And you just wanted to be as good as you could be. And that's where good conductors live. That's where they are, making you want to do that.
I don't know what organization wanted to honor Colonel Chase, but it had to do with some modernization that they did at the airport, and we got a Levi here, and all the speechifying and everything else. But we played right
outside the hangar, or in
yeah,
the hangar maybe.
No, the main office building. We played there. Arnie, we've played under him several times, and what an experience.
It is.
Oh my gosh, you have no question about what he wants. I mean, he knocked my socks off one time. I forget what we were rehearsing, but he did the cutoff and he says, now, without looking at the score, go back to measure 53. He knew it that well. And I thought, Jesus, that isn't fair. Anybody got a memory like that?
But Frank, like I said, Frank Casero was very demanding. We did Amparita Roke as an example. He went bump, 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 bump. And of course, we young folks knew vivace, that means fast. Shut up, you got a lot to learn. And Ray Casero came back that summer and said the same thing. Dad, that should go faster. Shut up, you got a lot to learn. He's played with Toscanini, right? He's got a lot to learn. And one of the things you learn is the conductor's always right.
But I remember this one year, Clarky Fabrizio, he was another one that played with the band. He was in our high school class, and he later went on to be the chairman of the music department in Cortland High School. But at the time, there was a movie in the State Theater in Cortland. It was called Quo Vadis, and it was about the early Roman emperors, and they would have the gladiator fights, and they had this drum beat. When the gladiators came into the Colosseum, well, Corky Fabrizio, who was one of the drummers, decided that we were going to play that drum beat somewhere along the parade route. And I remember he did it. And I remember Frank Becerra just about blew the top off his head because he never expected that. And it was the first and only time we ever did it. But that was an experience.
There's such a thing in music is called fear of sucking. And that's why I practice, and that's why everybody that I know that wants to play at their very best level practices. Because laying a clam in front of 900 people is extremely embarrassing.
My Uncle Ray, just like my grandfather, expected an awful lot of their students. If you didn't practice, you were in trouble.
If you're all listening to me, don't forget to practice.
Well, of course, Jim Reagan, who still plays in band, we usually get a laugh. He isn't shy with a quip, no matter who's standing on the podium. And I'm sure when you're standing on the podium, you can probably scan across the room and figure out where it's going to come from, and you know right away it's going to be Jim Reagan. So he's always funny. Jeff Dovey can come out with a line now and then, although he's quieter. You have to wait. But when he does, people listen.
One of the concerts we played in Groton, they had a, we used to play it at their, the building where they kept all their equipment for roads and everything. And then they built a small gazebo across the road there, and it was oval shaped. So you couldn't hear somebody on the other side. You try to hear everybody's music, and it was tough. And I think Natalie Miner fell off the back, and she ended up playing a bit because there was an opening. It wasn't the depth wasn't there, but the length was there. And I think she had a, I'm not sure if she set her stand up on the grass or not. I think we did that a couple of times. We really didn't want to play there anymore. Then we ended up playing at the Legion for old days. During one of our St. Anthony's Day festivals that we were playing, Fran Enler and I were always at the tail end of the flatbed truck. And we did have some spirits on the truck in a container with ice. It was beer, and somehow, for some reason, it never got back to us. We either got told, well, we'll get it to you, or we ended up with somebody like Art Davenport handing us an empty can. So we knew that Tony DeLucci Jr. would be over on the corner of Cedar Street and Port Watson Street, and he had something for us, Fran and me. And we were supposed to play National Emblem. No matter what we were playing, we had to switch to it. So we told Sam, Fran told Sam Fercucci, who was our director at the time, he told him ahead of time that this had to be done. And Sam was go for anything type of person. So we're looking and we could see Tony down there standing with a jug in one hand and something in the other hand. It turned out to be plastic cups, and he had a jug there, and we switched. We yelled at Sam, and Sam stopped the band, and we started playing National Emblem. And we got the jug from Tony. He was happy, and it turned out to be scotch and water, and I hated scotch, always did, but I acquired quite a taste for it that day. And nobody else wanted it, so Fran and I, we drank a whole jug, and it was not a small one, of scotch and water. We still had to go around to Commando Ave and play that. We played some numbers at the church, and it wasn't a couple hours later we had to be at Padua Center to play the concert. And we played very well. I think I hit notes I never hit before. It was very good. but we survived it, and it was a lot of fun. But that's something that we did do, and it was do it again too, I think.
Vince, you know, Vince is Vince. What can you say?
There were several interesting fellows back in the trombone section who used to bring a cooler of beer to our outside concerts, which is how I lured my son into playing an Old Timers Band. Look, the guys have a beer cooler in the back. Donna put an end to that in fairly short order, and my son said, I no sooner get an Old Timers Band and now there's no beer.
I remember one time at the Pumpkin Festival. Lynn, I can't remember Lynn's last name. I'm sorry? Lynn Abbey, okay. She was sitting outside of me. That was while I was still playing flute. And we had hay bales at the edge of the bandstand. And she got a little bit close to the edge, and we were in the middle of playing a piece, and she started to fall sideways off. So I grabbed her, and Mary Lee was sitting next to me, and she grabbed me, and it was just right around the flute section. We were just grabbing each other to prevent everyone from falling off into the straw. That was interesting. That was when we decided we had outgrown the bandstand.
And if I'm not mistaken, you were the conductor that took the band to the state fair a few times, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
How was that as a venue?
It was interesting. It was very warm. And it always didn't matter where they had said, well, this is where we're going to put you. Every single time we did it was always sun in your eyes, right there. Every darn time. It was, and you're squinting or you're trying to do, and I think that, well, I shouldn't say that, but and that, you know, I was hoping that they wouldn't just do that, but sometimes that's the only place they could put us, you know, and I understand that. And we had to be careful because it was very hot. And we had to be careful because one year, I think there were 4 or 5 that almost passed out.
One time, and I think it was that 1963, we were at Pomeroy School across from St. Anthony's Church, and the St. Anthony's celebration would take place in the parking lot there. They had tents and they had some rides and stuff, and carnival type atmosphere, and great food. But I sat next to who was at the time my hero trumpet player, which was Anthony Perfetti, Tony Perfetti, Peter Perfetti's older brother. He was a fabulous trumpeter and 3 years older than me. And one time we had these string lights that went around the bandstand that just had incandescent bulbs. So they attracted a lot of bugs at night. And Tony Perfetti had a solo to play, and he took a big breath, and a fly went in his mouth and came out of his nose because he started choking, and then it came out his nose, and then he played the solo perfectly after that. So I of course, I'd never seen anything like that. I rarely have seen anything since like that, but it was just another thing that elevated him in hero worship for me, that he could have that experience and then play flawlessly after that.
Well, Cincinnatus gets kind of buggy sometimes, and when we get under that tent at the library, but see, it's all worth it because afterwards we get cookies, and they're always really good. So I guess that makes up for the bugs.
This year, we have in our folders to play a medley from My Fair Lady, and I remember many years ago when we played it before, and it's at least 1,000 pages long. Probably that's an exaggeration, but let's go with that as a round number. And we were playing it at Little York, outdoors. And a gust of wind came up, I think rain and wind that year. And it blew our pages off the stand, Sam's and mine. We shared a stand. And when we put it all back on the stand, it wasn't in order. So we never played the right thing again for the whole rest of the piece. That was pretty embarrassing. We just looked at each other and shrugged. Well, we'll play with that page is, but that was pretty awful. Donna just looked at us.
An earlier memory is that we used to play a concert at Suggit Park. And I'm not sure if it was Old Timers Band or the earlier band, but people would show up and there was no place to sit at Suggit Park. The stage or flatbed truck or whatever was by the pool, and people would show up in their cars and not get out of their cars. And so they would applaud by beeping their horns. It's almost like if you watch a Pixar movie now, there's one called Cars where all the cars have personalities. Well, every horn manufacturer has a different sound and everything. So we would finish Poet and Peasant Overture, and people would just start beep, 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 and that was our applause because, I don't know why they didn't get out of their cars, but it was just, when you went to those Suggit Park concerts, that was the way it was. So that was, and I've never seen anything like that since, where the applause was your car horn. So that was kind of funny.
I think because everybody knows what I do for a living now as a family practice doc doing deliveries, it's not uncommon for me to show up late for rehearsals or for concerts. And most recently, it was a Prevel concert that I was a half hour late for. And Mike is conducting, and the whole back row is, boy or girl, boy or girl. And I see on Mike's face, while he's conducting. And then when Ed finally gets up, he looks at me, boy or girl. It's like, and it happened to be that we had another of the boys that I had delivered in the audience. He's like 6 weeks old in the audience for that concert too. So it's nice. It's a family. It's not like we live with each other. I mean, there's closeness and there's conflicts, and it's people you can rely on.
We were playing with the truck or whatever that thing was. Oh my God, I hated that, and I didn't like it because I was so afraid that people were going to jump off of it or whatever they were.
There was always the worry of sitting on the side and worrying that you would tip off the side, or that somebody else would tip off the side. So we all tried to scrunch in the middle as much as we could. And we just played one march after another. So we knew what was coming up next. The worst thing of playing on the flatbed is any corner. Hold on while you turn. And we played on a flatbed from the top of the hill going down into Groton. We didn't just play down in the village in those days. We started at the top and we climbed on the flatbed and we went down the hill and around the curves. It was heart-stopping. I'm not sure we played. We were supposed to be playing. I don't know. I can't remember. I can only remember fear. More fear than when you're playing something you're thinking, well, I'm not playing that very well. Real fear, physical fear.
I was in the band playing flute and piccolo. St. Anthony's Day, the wind-up march. And she stood up for the piccolo solo to, what the hell was the name?
Stars and Stripes.
Yeah. Stars and Stripes. Well, she got up and she was right behind me. And all of a sudden I hear a tuba playing those notes, and I looked around and it was the tuba player with Charlie Grutini that was there for the weekend. Now, there's a difference between the tuba and a piccolo. Piccolo's like this and the tuba is like that. How the heck he ever could do it, and they hit it off perfectly.
Another very cool experience was at the concert, St. Anthony's, of course, at the Padwin Youth Center. And I think this was in 1998. I ran a concert called Apple Jazz for 30 years, from 84 to 2014. And so I always tried to have it the weekend of or the weekend before St. Anthony's, so that I would be up here from Florida in Cortland for all the celebrations. So I had two guys in the band that were guests. One was Dave Gannett, who's a fabulous tuba player. The other was John Allred, a trombonist, who also is a fabulous tuba player, but he only plays tuba for fun. So we borrowed, from Homer High School, we borrowed 2 sousaphones, and after Apple Jazz the night before, which is a Saturday night, on Sunday they marched in the parade with the 2 sousaphones, which the Old Timers Band has always been a little weak in the tuba section because not that many tuba players in a small community. But this day we had, I think, Bob Wright on tuba and these 2 guys on sousaphone. So that was a really fun day for the whole band because we had this giant sound in the bottom of the band, especially for the marches that we were doing. So that night at the 7 o'clock concert, both of these tuba players know from memory the piccolo part for Stars and Stripes Forever. And so they said, let us stand up on Stars and Stripes at the end of the concert and play the piccolo part. So those guys in unison played the piccolo part for Stars and Stripes Forever. Well, there was a lot of applause after that because, first of all, you never hear a tuba player doing that. It's such a novelty, and to have 2 guys doing it, and they did it flawlessly. So that was a big deal, a fun night.
Art Davenport was a good friend of mine. We went through high school and we played in VFW bands and everything. And he's one of the ones that got me into the Civic Band when it first started. And he had a bad problem with cataracts, real bad. And we were playing on the gazebo at the Village Green in Homer. And when we got to play the Stars and Stripes to stand up, he got me good with a slide, real good. And I played a note that does not exist. It doesn't exist, but it became a new note. And I looked up and Donna looked at me and I just shrugged my shoulders, that was it. So I belonged to the Homer Lions Club. And I talked to them and we do things for eyes and stuff. I don't belong to them anymore, but so we got him in to have cataract surgery done on his eye, and that helped him out, and it helped me out too for when we play Stars and Stripes.
Vince is a wealth of stories in history. You could sit there and he can tell you stories till the next day. It's amazing. And it's just listening to some of the history that he'll talk about, both band history and personal and other stuff. He used to play cornet, he used to do this and that. And it's just interesting to listen to somebody like that. He's almost like an encyclopedia of the band's history because he knew a lot of the original people. He's been with the band a long time, back when I believe it was St. Anthony's band. But he is like almost the historian of the band because you have any questions about previous stuff, talk to Vince, he'll probably have an answer.
St. Anthony's Day. Every year, well, for a number of years when my knees really got bad, I would walk up to the barber shop where that's historic for us. We would start out the morning playing in front of the Green Arch. We'd play some numbers there in respect for John DeSenza, and we would play there, and then we would form up and we'd make our own parade and go down a couple blocks to the Ange's Barber Shop on Hubbard Street, and they would have a layout of food there that was unbelievable, and we'd play, and then we would eat, and then we would drink, and then we'd play, and then we'd go back to the church, and then we'd play there and get in the parade. Well, I would come out of the church and I'd go in, get my car and go home because I couldn't do the walk around. So one year, Sherry White and Terry Martins had a little, it was small, it was just, it had one person on it. They had it behind a four-wheeler. And because Sherry couldn't march with that big tuba. So they did that. So I asked them one time in band afterwards, I said, is there any chance that you got something that I could ride on? Because I told them what happened. They said, well, yes, we do. So they came up with that bigger little trailer, And I've been writing on that ever since. And you could put like 6 people on there if you want. So sit on that and write around. I think there's a picture of me on that thing. It was funny because I wear my Italian hat. That's my signature. I got to wear my Italian cap for St. Anthony's Day. And my little Italian flag on the side here. But that was nice of them. It put me back in where I could do the fun part of going around the neighborhood.
And St. Anthony's Day, we also put in a long day marching, walking, no truck. And naturally by 9:30 at night, we're ready to quit. But the unspoken rule was you don't quit until all the sausage is sold.
Boom. I'll tell you another story about bands and music, including this one. The conductor will say, and the process is, we play the same concert, whether there's 3 people in the audience or whether there's 300 people in the audience, we play the same concert.
It does, because I stopped playing for several years, and you know, and part of me was missing. And then until you get back into it, it was that day at the State Fair, and I ran into the Cortland Old Timers. Who runs into the Cortland Old Timers Band at the State Fair?
Old Timers. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, feed your soul.
My favorite part is that it's a tremendous hobby. It's become a tremendous hobby and a diversion from day-to-day work. Whether you're retired from day-to-day career or you're still in a career, it's a tremendous diversion. And it took me a while to appreciate that, because we would have rehearsals for 2 hours on a weeknight, and typically the next morning I knew I had a full load of work, and often in another county. I had to get up early, drive there, be ready, read some material, be ready to ask questions and listen to people. And I thought, I really don't think I want to go to rehearsal tonight. it's just gonna be too much. But I would go. And then you have to concentrate. It's a different world, it's a different sound, it's a different feeling, and it's fun. And at the end of the 2 hours, I'm driving home, knowing I have to get up godly early, but I am so thankful that I went, because it's just thrilling. It's thrilling to be with the people you're with, the sound that you make together. You have to concentrate. You can't even think about the next day or what happened that day, because you have to concentrate on what you're doing. That's really what I love about it. I tell young people who are playing an instrument, I say, don't give it up. I know you can't quite appreciate getting older and wanting a hobby, but play as long as you can, because at some point it is going to be a wonderful diversion and a wonderful hobby, and to be able to attract people now, young people, to play, I think is wonderful.
I think it was more volunteering to do it because I was so afraid we weren't going to have a band to play in. I wanted to do whatever I could to keep. I just so enjoyed the band. I didn't want to lose that fun that we have, and it's meant so much to me. It's meant a lot to my family over the years.
The feeling of camaraderie, I love playing music. I just didn't realize how much I'd missed it with all the years I hadn't played. Thursday night rehearsals and then concerts are my favorite nights of the year, bar none. I look forward to every single rehearsal. I look forward to every concert. I enjoy making music with people who feel the same way.
There's nothing like playing music with your friends. And to be able to do that in the Old Timers Band and some of the other groups that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with is probably more fun than I deserve to have. So that's really about all I had to say, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it.
But I think if anybody is interested in music and playing, there wouldn't be a better group to join to learn and grow and just have fun. I mean, they just always are laughing and having the best time.
This was a lot more fun than I thought it would be. I hate this stuff.
Well, this is
I
a
know.
good, this is a
This
good
is like
group.
a conversation with the
Good
group.
group.
So thank you for accommodating the bunch of us because
That's awesome.
it's
Yeah.
so much easier.